This is the main podcast with Carrie and Evan. This week's guests, Mark Barnett and John Engler from Higher Grounds and Above Board Cannabis.
Hey everybody, it's Carrie with the main podcast. Want to thank you for listening to us for the past year and a half. Your support, interest, and friendship has been a great blessing on us, more than we ever expected. Want to thank our sponsors of the main podcast currently: La Coca Nostra, Treeline Cannabis, Wisely Cannabis, Corporal Cannabis, Mend, Dunny Gummy, Cure, Rugged Roots, and Watered Roots. It is because of their contributions to the main podcast that we can continue to give you this type of information about the Maine cannabis scene. Thank you.
Needless to say, another episode of the main podcast. Today we are joined by John from High Sale and Mark Barnett from Higher Grounds. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Oh, hell yeah. We're happy to be here.
That's now High Sale Above Board.
High Sale Above Board.
We've become a hyphenated conglomerate.
Let's give a quick shout out, and that's located at what's the address of the store?
353 Riverside Drive.
And that's
in
right
Auburn.
on Route 136 too. If you're heading to Freeport, heading to Auburn, you can't miss it.
Yeah, it's on Route 136, just down the street from Cure.
Yes, sir.
I have a question about that, though. Is there any sailing, like, below board? I don't think that's even a thing. Right?
Well, you were explaining to me about there's above board and below board. There's terminology for. He went into this. You might have to tell us about the whole name and what's behind above board.
Oh, what's behind Above Board? Is that what you were talking about?
No, that's not what he was
Okay,
talking
because
about.
yeah,
I was trying to turn into it.
Barnett gave me this winky look, and I was like, Jesus, what is he talking about?
Black helicopters, man, run.
So, above board, as it turns out, is a nautical term, and it effectively refers to when you have the entire crew of the ship up on the deck, therefore visible to crews on other ships. And this is a way that ships could approach each other at sea. If you put your whole crew up above board, you can see that they're not like loading the cannons and like getting their bayonets ready to
Drinking rum.
murder and stuff.
Oh, right.
And yeah, so it was a way of knowing that you could have a peaceful encounter at sea. That's above board. If you look it up in Webster's, it says legitimate, honest, and open, which is what we wanted the store to be.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
Fail. Well, how about Higher Grounds?
Yeah.
How did that name come across?
Yeah, wait, and no, to be fair, I didn't. So you guys, Higher Grounds is a cannabis storefront also.
Absolutely, yeah. We're a medical dispensary. I mean, caregiver dispensary, whatever the hell term you want to use. Mm-hmm. In Portland, technically, it is a medical marijuana retail store.
Yep.
But it's been a coffee shop since 2017.
So this is at the same place that the coffee shop
Same
is?
spot.
Oh, awesome.
Yep.
And when did you guys, because I went in there, I think, prior to, for some small meetings and stuff, I think before you guys were selling cannabis products.
Yeah, when we had table space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, what is it like now? I mean, how has the transition been? You're still serving coffee, I assume, and...
Yeah, I mean, we're still right down there in the old port, kind of tourist walk around, crowds all day in the summer kind of spot. But, we really wanted to keep that business. That was the whole concept from the beginning. In 2017, we knew we were pursuing a cannabis license. The city didn't have any. The adult use medical thing was totally up in the air. And we knew we just wanted to get open, start building our brand, introduce people to who we are, what we do. And it's, the other kind of, to some extent, it's my other vice. I have cannabis.
Coffee?
I wouldn't call cannabis a vice, but coffee is a little bit of a vice. Like, we can all admit that caffeine is a mean drug.
The coffee at Higher Grounds is super
fabulous.
legit as well.
Is that what you got into? Did you look around for coffee roasters or people who could carry it locally? Was that the idea?
Absolutely. When we basically decided to pull the trigger on looking in Portland and finding a spot, I knew that this is how I wanted to do it, but I needed a partner. So, I'm from Maine. I know Portland's roasters, and I knew right away that Speckled Axe was the partner that I wanted. It's definitely the best green buyer, meaning when he's buying coffees, introducing new stuff, whatever vibe he's looking for the finished product. It's really the hardest part is buying those unroasted beans, right? Because it's a whole different set of skills. And Matt over there at Speckled Axe is just an amazing, just really, I've always just really loved his coffee. There's a lot of great roasters in Maine, but
Is it about the quality of the bean? Is that what you're looking at?
Don't even ask me these questions.
No,
I'm
okay,
totally
never mind.
unqualified.
No, all right. I didn't know how much you ventured into it since you said it was like one of your vices.
Sure. I mean, look,
Indulgence, I guess.
Yeah, I have an enthusiast's knowledge, but that is nothing compared to people that actually do it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, right.
But, it's really great because when I approached Matt and I kind of told him about the concept, he was totally loved it. He's not even a heavy cannabis user or anything like that, but he just loved the idea, loved the concept, loves, of course, an opportunity to display his coffee somewhere else. And so we basically just kind of came to an informal agreement, like, I'm only going to purchase your coffee and I want to rep you down there in the Old Port. And, oh, by the way, do you know anybody who's looking to manage a coffee program? And so I really lucked out, and thank you for your compliment earlier about the quality of the product. It is phenomenal. I would argue it's probably some of the best coffee on the East Coast, and that's really a lot due to my general manager, who I met through Matt. Her name's Tessa. She used to work for Matt, and he was like, "Oh my God, she's out trimming weed in California right now, but you guys have to connect." So that's kind of how the like actually making it work really took off on the coffee side. I don't think anybody expected it to be a 3.5-year wait from there.
No, for sure. What a stall, huh?
Who has been really behind
that? Was brutal.
One thing I want to know is who's really been behind the branding and creating the Higher Grounds brand? Because I feel like that's one thing that's been like a centerpiece for you guys. One thing I've noticed about like your Instagram and stuff like that, it seems like you guys have really been brand centric and focused from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I came out of the sort of research analyst world in business. So, I knew that this is a super competitive market, that there's a lot of great product around. I mean, we all know that. It's falling off the trees. It's ridiculous how much great product there is. And that it was already a very brand-centric market. People were buying their Hazy Hill. People were going for their green truck. Depending on where you're at, you had your sort of your anchor brands, and you really have to establish that if you want really to succeed, especially in retail too, because retail is a totally different ballgame than cultivation or even processing or making products. So
a lot of cross promotion.
Yeah, just and finding partners and knowing what will fit with what you really want to be doing. And I think that was, obviously we're very lucky in Maine. There's just such a huge, cornucopia of options to choose from, which is the most special thing about our market. And so I was really able to both know what I wanted from that shop, and then find people with whom that actually resonated. Mm-hmm. And, if I went into New York City or I went even into California and said, this is my amazing concept, none of the products fit what I'm trying to do, because it just doesn't work that way. You're not allowed to be in the market if you're a 2-person team, husband, wife, or small cultivator who just loves cannabis and has like this particular way of growing and has a particularly excellent product or strain. But here we can do that. And so I was waiting for years to be like, I want to showcase my friend's amazing shit. Mm-hmm. And it took a while, but I'm glad that glad that you see that, because it's a project,
I couldn't have imagined seeing the market just unfold a little bit as it was stalled out front of you. But I guess to some degree, that's not a bad thing. You allow it to kind of take its own shape and you can evaluate it or analyze it like you like to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it cuts both ways. You've got both an opportunity to watch the market develop around you and see what people are buying, and there's a little bit of market intelligence out there. So especially if you know a lot of folks, and that's one thing one of my specialties is just knowing shitloads of people and kind of connecting and maintaining relationships and networking. And so I did get to see a little bit of that. So yeah, there was a little bit less guesswork at my launch. I kind of knew, okay, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. And that process of watching it all happen and fighting over it, frankly, the minute I got here, I started fighting. I just threw myself right into it, both in Augusta and in Portland. and you meet people, they surface, and so that I think was an advantage to some extent in terms of hitting my note. Of course, my pocketbook.
Yeah, that wasn't
totally different
that
story.
wasn't nice.
There's
that wasn't nice.
Very different, budgetary.
Well, do you mind me digging into that too? Is not your pocketbook 100%, but
yeah, sure.
Did you see an upside of owning a coffee shop in Portland? And what is if weed aside, cannabis aside, how hard is it to sustain a small coffee shop like that in such a big city? Where obviously, I mean, the rents for some of those downtown areas, I imagine, are astronomical.
To anybody out there listening, don't even fucking try.
Yeah,
Don't even do it.
No, I mean, not to be cynical, but
it's hard.
coffee's a very low margin business unless you are a roaster. So if you're a roaster, that coffee shop, it's kind of to some extent, John, you've started to see this as a cultivator vertically integrating now into a retail shop.
Right.
Like that retail shop makes so much more sense because of the cultivation and vice versa. And that's very true with coffee as well. Now, of course, we were right in the tourist gut where, you're kind of guaranteed
High
X
flow.
amount
Flow.
of traffic to be sniping off of. But what people kind of lose sight of, and I think people are continuing to lose sight of this in a market like Portland, is actually your regulars and the Portlanders are going to be way more of your margin. Unless you're really right in that one spot, like trying to think of what's
That it has a
Liquid Riot.
universality to
Like Liquid Riot.
universalness. I'm sorry.
No, I know what you're saying, but Liquid Riot, that's a place that probably makes almost all their margin off of tourists. Right. Who's going to pay $22 for a burger? But people do. And that wasn't really our concept, was to skin the tourists, but it's like tourists could feed you to keep you alive while you grow, spread your wings, and really integrate yourself into the
They almost
ecosystem.
provide that capital above it living. It's like
Yeah.
that's your extra stuff to grow, like you said, in advance.
Yeah, they're feeding you,
Yeah.
and that keeps you alive, and it's not, it's not your bread and butter at the end of the day, but it pays the fixed costs. It pays the
Yeah,
bills.
regulars in almost any industry, especially food service, hospitality,
Right.
and being a coffee shop where you want people to also stay in and kind of enjoy the
It's not
atmosphere.
Times Square.
No.
It's not Times Square. Nothing in Portland is Times Square. Nothing in Maine is Times Square.
Yeah. And I think there are some businesses that try and that to replicate those type of venues. And as cool as they are, as everyone wants it, but that's what makes those areas like Times Square, like Boston. That's what makes those areas special because they're not. You can't replicate them. They're special that
The
location.
geography
It's
is everything.
It's
right?
unique to that. So I also wanted to talk to John a little bit about branding and spinning off because you have High Sale, which is essentially your cultivation. Above Board has become your store, and I've been in it. I was in it in the early stages to see some of the progress that you're making, and there was a lot of focus on brand as well. And I don't know if you want to talk kind of about the location that you have and some of the stuff that you guys went through and some of the thought that was put into it, because there is a heavy nautical theme, but not one that's over the top. One that's just it's like kind of a slight touch. It's a really cool location. One that me and Carrie fell in love with the first time we saw it.
You did too. You knew it was always more than just a cultivation.
I was
space.
amazed it was in that building. I was like, holy moly, it's a beautiful space.
So I built the grow first.
You want me to
in
smoke
the
more? Is what
second
you're telling me?
floor. In the second
want some
floor
of
of
that
the
shit.
building.
I just didn't know how you were with sharing. And everything.
I'm fine. All right.
And there was the grow's built in an old cabinet shop, like a wood shop. And there was a showroom space associated with the business downstairs that wasn't fully utilized that we knew we could turn into a store because I discussed it with the owner of the building. And so eventually we were able to do that last year after COVID started. We kind of, hunkered down. I had met through one of my old friends that's been involved with the business for several years now. Another guy who he got laid off. He had been working he lives here in Maine, but he had been working flying around the country, basically building stores and grows for.
Oh, really? In marijuana-friendly states already? Or
Yeah,
newer ones?
well, for a big company that doesn't operate in Maine, that operates in I think 10 different states altogether. I'm not really sure.
Some experience in the dirty, right?
Well, he had experience.
He's probably dealt a lot with city and state.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
He had fought far bigger fires than we fight in Auburn, Maine, in terms of that kind of stuff. So he actually got laid off from his job, and we had already met socially. and we'd hit it off. And so he started kind of hanging around, and ultimately we decided to work together on developing the store. And he helps out with all kinds of things. He's a pretty talented guy.
Yep.
So you can meet him. That's PJ at Above Board. If you go to Above Board, you can ask for PJ.
It's all about people, man, especially in a small business environment. It really is.
It will be. And I mean, it's going to tend to be that way. It's always going to be
PJ
about
came
that.
up with the name Above Board. Actually, that was his idea, his suggestion. But we,
Did he know you'd know it immediately, the meaning?
Is he getting residuals? Or?
Yeah, what's up? What's in it for him on this one?
Actually, what happened was what we knew is that we wanted to do a new brand that was like a retail brand that we would launch that would be apart from High Sale, which I thought was a product brand.
Yeah.
I think that, and I think
agree.
a lot of people have preached that. I think it worked well. It's that model has worked well with a lot of people. We see like Bridget Farms has used that, I believe. Rugged Root Sensimilla.
Well, what does Target do? Right?
Yeah.
What does Walmart do? What does CVS?
They'll
Well,
give
even
name
creating
to,
sub brands. You
yeah,
look at like the
sub-brands.
Young Group. They're like they have cereal and then they brand it all underneath these different names. So it's just kind of like basic business. But
It can lose
I
people
agree.
sometimes.
Yeah.
It can. That instantaneous can sometimes be a stall. But then
That's where I think the credit goes, though, too, where there is a lot of consistency between High Sale, Above Board, the whole branding of you walking into a nautical shop, and that was one of the things that I was talking about. I really liked about it was
he was
the
excited
thought.
to show the rope.
The rope. That's literally the one thing I have in my head too. It's just those small details where it's not over the top though. It doesn't feel like you're walking into, the mainly Moose or something like that, where they're trying to be over the top with everything. But that's their brand. I think it's
So
just a nice
the-
subtle
Was that a
touch.
captain's house at one time?
What, the store
Yeah.
space? No.
Before?
Fucking
Prior to
Captain
that?
for what, the Androscoggin River?
Cabinets, man.
Oh,
No.
Always
So,
cabinets? Yes, for the Endro. That's what I was thinking. Too far up?
The history of the building that the grow and the store are built out in is that it was built 100 years ago. Originally, it was a slaughterhouse, and then it served for woodworking for many decades after. The Thomas Mosier Furniture Company was actually started in that location.
no shit.
I didn't know that.
That's pretty cool. Did they
Now
have
he's
anything
got
to do with some
mega
of that work
mansion
in
and
there?
the fucking Harpswell there.
And
Oh,
there's
it's the space, is it?
my landlord's business, which they do, like they hang doors in the casings and kind of ship them out. It's a really big business. It's like certainly a bigger business than our business.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you can't have my nautical lights, John. Just so you know.
And so the
John, when did you open
I
up
have
the
no
store?
nautical
When was it
anything, but-
again?
in February.
It was in February.
Yeah, and the nautical thing is because I actually I grew up here in Maine in Bodenham, and I was very lucky that my parents had a little sailboat, and me and my brothers would go out with them in Casco Bay and beyond.
Very nice.
So I grew up sailing the coast of Maine. My dad, sailing is a huge passion for him. And, I had all those
That got passed on to you?
those experiences in my childhood. Like I've sailed across the Gulf of Maine to Nova Scotia before in an open water crossing.
Shit.
And definitely gone, all the way up through Penobscot Bay and even beyond. Many times in my childhood.
Many times.
Yeah.
That's nice to be able to share that. No, I've never had that much ocean time. I can't say, or bay time.
Yeah, we were really lucky. We kind of, my brothers and I kind of hated it because we were kids and it's like small boat and you're trapped and, your parents had a lot of rules. Captain Dad had a lot of rules. But we
All
were,
making sense now, of
yes,
course.
we were lucky to be able to get to do that, obviously. And
There's a lot of things like that in Maine. You if you've ever moved or lived anywhere else, or you just have some context, you just take for granted almost how lucky you are that at almost any time you could roll down the hill to somewhere beautiful, remote, somewhat pristine, quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
My
one thing.
parents got a
Right.
place on Tacoma Lakes. John and I were talking about it because we didn't realize we're just a couple lakes apart right now at times.
Oh, yeah.
When I'm up that way.
Yeah.
They had it since mid-'70s, and it was
It's a cool thing to say. We're just a couple lakes apart. Like,
We're
there's
just
a
a
lot
couple
of
lakes
ways you can
apart.
say
No,
that.
down the lake, neighbor, over
something like
there.
that. You know? Let's say what?
He said down the lake, neighbor. Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's true. I hear a lot of times when I was growing
We all
up,
have a retreat.
I hear a lot of, I can't wait to leave the state, can't wait to leave. And I always thought, I was like, I fucking like it here. I don't know. I like the Four Seasons. I always thought it was a great place to live. And now I see more and more. I think as people grow up and get older, they realize that that's why a lot of people want to retire here.
Sure.
It's a pretty cool place to live as long as you can weather through the winter. And then maybe you can become a snowbird like a lot of other people do. But
You got to be like my mom and see winter as a time to put some muscle on.
Yeah.
Put some muscle on.
Put some muscle on. Just get out and shovel every day, and you're like battling and all this weight. You just attacks the winter. Exactly. That whole
always flowing.
It's a more physical requirement. I mean, unless you have a giant garden or something. But
yeah,
winter is physically demanding, which is why so many older people leave. Just can't physically hack it.
Yeah, so long your body can endure that.
I can't open my doors anymore. Okay, I got to give up. Yeah.
One of the things, Mark, we spoke to you, or I got to speak to both of you. Back in late April, it was.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the OMP VLA meetings coming up.
Yes.
We're always talking about the worst case scenarios, and
Yes,
that's what.
we were.
And then this happens. Successes, and kind of a little bit more than I think we all anticipated.
Yeah.
Would that be fair to say?
Well,
kind of resounding in the sense of the message?
We can't take for granted what we've just achieved.
No, not at all. I'm not talking that
that's
way.
right.
It was just nice to know that.
That is a very fair characterization. I think that all of us are almost still trying to interpret what that means. But just not only did we squeak by and survive, but we actually proactively set a new edge in the sense that it's clear now that you can't just sort of assert sovereignty over something that everybody's okay with as an outsider, whether you are Curaleaf or Acreage Holdings or the fucking governor's office, and not to put this on Governor Mills, but
right.
literally there's a lot of things that went into what almost happened.
Right.
And it's not an issue necessarily of who the person is, but the way that the institution operates. And even an institution as powerful as the main executive branch, when they went too far, which they very clearly did, everybody said no. It wasn't just the House. It wasn't just the Senate.
It was a
wasn't
strong
just the people.
influence, though, from the executive on, if they wanted to. I mean, that in itself should have been, especially when you have a dominant number in both.
Well, that's why we all thought worst case scenario. So, we were all preparing for that because you just know your hill is steeper when you have to literally argue with the executive's party to try to split them. And their very concept of how they organize is to be unified, right? And I would say that that's something that's special about Maine versus elsewhere. That kind of centrist unity, serve the party first, kind of totally anti-democratic stuff, just isn't as strong here. And
It's had a reputation of that, right?
Right, and I
really
think
kind of swaying one way or
The
the other.
independent
always
streak.
sort of.
Well, the independent streak, yeah, exactly. The purple state, whatever you want to call it. But we actually saw this in 2021 more than I've ever witnessed it anywhere. Probably. I mean, it's like I hate to overestimate the impact of something like this because again, there's new bills that are going to come and there's going to be new stuff that's going to happen and industries are already these organic wild things. But we did something that no other state has done in a lot of ways, and that other states and other activists can now literally they can Google it and say, oh, wow, that preamble really does explain what's going on right now. Wow, this outlining and redlining of executive authority really is the issue that we have to look at. The more you let it be an insiders club, the worse it's going to be for literally everyone except those tiny percent. And it's just so hard to play inside baseball in Maine. We open
These type of politics are generational, though, or it's how politics are operated. Isn't it about getting the voice or having the voice, having the chance to have a voice?
So when you
Not
say
only
generational,
that, but you have to be able to, sometimes, regardless of the party, it's almost the agendas that are at play in cycles a little bit more.
You mean the nonpartisan, more cultural element of
and
like
so how they
attitudes
grab
towards
on
control
and they'll pull on different. So Maine has been a little bit more impervious to it in the past, but also in some other ways, social acceptance, it's been a little slower. Not that it's damaging, it's learning.
It's a sedate
It's
pace.
understanding a little bit better.
It's a calm pace. It's a pace that isn't necessarily driven by desperation from any angle, or too many, more intense pressures at cities that have larger populations and like areas where, Google and Amazon are outbidding each other to try to be, those kinds of places that just have so much more intensity and they have so much more chaos. Like Maine is a little more stable in that way, I think. And that just to that point about sometimes they're slower to adopt things, but like it's an ocean wave. It's
when
not,
it happens.
It's not like a peak and then a valley and a peak and a valley. It's like we are moving in this direction. And anyway, I don't know.
I like the
It
way
does
you
suck
think
to
of
think.
it.
It does suck to think, though, that when you look at a lot of other states that are kind of becoming, able to provide on a medical angle or recreational angle, a lot of times the lobbyists are already there in the sense of the rules that are set from the beginning are nothing similar to the rules that
you're
are set in
absolutely
Maine.
So on point.
We kind of had a really, and like I have to give credit. I feel like a state like Oklahoma, they really just opened it up to everyone, and that was a more fair. But like, you look like Pennsylvania, some of these places require like, accounts for insurance. You have to have like $1 million insurance bonds and stuff like this, and a couple
$250,000 cultivation application fee.
exactly. So, and, it's like, and so those are
They're
right
not even
from the
hiding
grip.
the
Included on
cost.
That is the first ground level caregiver.
Yeah.
Where if we take the first ground level caregiver in Maine,
It's 10 grand.
was what, and then they
Get your
were
crop up, pay your dues.
and so I think there's a huge difference between that. And so we are pretty fortunate, and I'm glad that we're definitely having these victories. And I wish more states would kind of see that they don't have to enter the cannabis market and glorify places like acreage holdings and other things like that.
I think that's a big part of why we decided when we were drafting, bills for this session. There were a lot of ideas out there in the community. There were a lot of, actually, if you go and look at the record, there were, John, I don't even remember how many cannabis bills that didn't get passed. We passed like 4 different cannabis bills, 2 of them really impactful.
impact.
But there's this, there was this whole body of other ones. And there are a lot of ideas about what to do and a lot of things. And I think we decided, based on seeing that reality, that nowhere else is there an established existing market that can point to fucking sales tax. I can point to your neighbor's job. I can point to your cousin's struggle with cancer. I can point to you and say, we are already here. This is already a thing. When you talk about the dangers to the children, the reason we have to track because these guys are all crooks, wouldn't that already be obvious? And everyone around the room can be like, yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah.
You're like, so thank you. And as you say, that is very, very unique. And we can't lose sight of that either as activists, because on a national level, if you just assume that making the argument, that's the right argument, which is that first part, but not having the ecosystem that we have, which is the second part, that strategy isn't necessarily replicable, right? You are going to have a different, but anyway, just to get to where we came from on that is we decided to swing for the fences and say, actually, not only are we going to put this in this bill, but we're going to put this in this bill, and we're going to put this in this bill, we're going to put this in this bill, and we're going to strip out tracking.
I was like, just as
go
assertive
for
as
it.
it was in our face, the counter was just as strong.
Just as strong, because it was, I think, and
That was necessary, wasn't it?
I think so. And I think we as an association, this is one of the things I'm happiest about what has happened with, political organizing and with just the members of the association, how that's really kind of matured, is that I think we all talked about it and we thought about those other scenarios a lot. And John proposes, well, if we do that, doesn't that invite, and somebody else is worried about a totally different angle, but we're all kind of talking about it, in a very real way. And we could get to consensus on something that controversial. Because if you get a room full of caregivers, 20 of them together, and say, hey guys, what's the most important issue to you? So I would have people call me after we released the text of LD 939 and say, well, why didn't you put my issue in there? Really letting kids who are 18, 19, and 20 who are part of a family work in their parents' store is more important than blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, you can tell me that and present that to me in a list and participate in civic activity and do things for others. And then maybe people will recognize that issue more or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, but sidetrack.
Not letting it get unnoticed, though. You're not allowing anything to slip through.
Yeah, and we were able to, like I was, just kind of trying to get to about what the association came together enough to do really controversial things. Like, let's not just delay the rules 2 years. Let's change how rules are written all the way back so that they have to go through every possible eyeball on them, as they should. Let's require them to do an extra level of contact with the community, and let's just take away some of their powers. Because no matter who you are, good, bad, neutral, aggressive, conservative, this and that,
change.
It can change.
Yeah.
And they don't need the tools that they were asking for. And that was the biggest disconnect, is that you don't just create a dangerous, powerful, over-regulatory state without a reason for every single thing that thing is then going to do. Because why are you regulating it if there isn't a clearly articulate? How could you possibly do it right? Anyway, so we did a very controversial thing and said, like you said, oh, that was an incredible big, strike you just took, giant missile. Well, the anti-aircraft, was overwhelming. We actually came back with even more and then dropped it right there. Got a 33 or 32-3 vote, 32-2 vote in the Senate. Mills doesn't veto it. Wow. All of a sudden this isn't.
Well, that would have been almost political assassination for her if she does veto that.
Yeah, you're right.
On that end.
At that point,
it would be a symbolic act. But it would have forced
a negative
would
one
that have
for her.
inflicted a little bit more of eyes being looked at that?
Thousands
Is that
of votes
also it
lost
too?
in the general election for something like that. Yep. And we were kind of relying on that to some extent. And I don't try to say this too, again, what's the word I'm looking for? But that's why we brought and wanted, no matter where your politics lie, we wanted to have so many people on the other side of the line and independents. Yeah. If you look at our crazy, quote unquote, controversial bill, it had an independent on that as well. And we did that literally intentionally. I mean, of course, the guys' views on cannabis also aligned, but it's, Democrats, Republicans, independents, we're the Greens, anybody. This is nonpartisan. It's not bipartisan, it's nonpartisan. And that makes things like vetoes way more challenging. Even if it had been a closer vote, it would still be for her to veto it, because then the other party will run against you on it. And that's so.
But the amount of damage that could have been done in such a short period of time, though, I sometimes wonder when we talk about dates like an election, the next 2 years can possibly sometimes make an impact on a state or a city level, right? And it could be 4, it could be 6 before it really impacts the changes that have come about.
Well, I hope that that's what the strategists would read into a situation like this, or would bring to the analysis. And to be perfectly frank, real talk politics, I think some people did get that message. Yeah. Like, whoa, even if we kind of agree thematically, or this isn't my issue, I see the damage 6 years from now, tomorrow, next week, maybe in certain districts, a 10-person vote swing might make the difference.
Oh yeah.
We had a great representative lose to Representative Laurel Libby by how many votes just this past election, and that's a complete swap, totally different types of people. Anyway, it can happen very quickly here. And so I think that was something eventually that was observed and incorporated into the overall strategy votes.
We did have that immediate kind of energy with the senator. God, it eludes me, but I'm just having a high moment. I can't remember his name, who came on in on the election. It was in March, I think.
Oh yeah, Senator Craig Hickman.
Yes.
Yeah, wow. And see,
Let's
another thing about
I said his name. Right?
Serendipity.
I just had a high moment. That's
Talk about serendipity right there. I mean, that was another thing that needed to have happened.
$1 million to somebody recently. I forget what the cause was.
Well, I wouldn't quote you on that.
Not being a senator.
Well,
What did you say?
So his was an overwhelming, statement kind of victory in a marginal district, and I think it, there were so many.
Came at the right time.
Came at the right time, but there were so many other political currents. But a lot of people who are pro-cannabis or just anti-stupid cannabis contributed to his campaign because they know that he is listened to there, that he's respected. And if we need to do something right on this issue during a crisis, which is where we were at, that was a major crisis point. Do these rules get implemented? That would have been a disaster.
It would have.
Literally been a disaster. Anybody who's a serious adult can recognize this now. And you knew that he was going to be the linchpin with a certain group. I don't put Craig is a wonderful person. He's an amazing senator, incredible public servant, so talented. But nobody's like a hero. Nobody's a god,
not
right?
any one individual.
And you know that
just a role, I suppose. The position being held.
Well, and he's also
something
working
that
on
felt
right to food, and he's a senator. He's there's a lot that they have on their plates. So he's going to be that perfect support in the moment when he's best used.
Yep.
And that's how every part of a political campaign should be thought of, and we just kind of had this organic alliance, and Craig has been around these issues forever. He wrote the Minority Report for 1719, which passed the adult use program. He's been a part of it. And yeah, wow, was that huge. Having somebody in the room during the public hearing to be like, let me ask a question that everyone needs to hear answered. Let me give you another 2 minutes to talk. That was invaluable. How many times did we see that,
Yeah.
He was literally holding down a public hearing or holding down a work session, being like, well, everybody else had to leave for that. We don't have this other thoughtful person in the room. They could just slam this through. I just need to sit here and ask some more questions. That's politics. That's politics.
Well, we had a lot of people who had a chance to at least organizations, alliances, associations. I know there was a lot of collaborative work. To what degree? Obviously, it's known between the groups that were involved.
Huge amount.
Large.
Yeah,
and I think the overall public response, or was the cannabis public, was really really supportive as well. So leaps and bounds. I think we made some headway there. We have some work ahead of us for sure. I guess we can't.
But that was a great lesson.
Hard,
you highlight a great lesson that it was the coordination and the coming together and the collaborative work that people did that really drove home and cemented the success. You can have a wonderful political gambit and tactic intellectually, and then the execution of that through messy real time gets.
I gotta admit, it was my first foray into state politics ever, to be able to take a look at it and really be involved or try to have an awareness of what policy changes were going. Before this moment, I hadn't really had an exercise.
Do you know how
I'm one of the newbies?
Why you can't see it on on the radio, but my smile is so wide right now because I think that happened for thousands of people in Maine, which is what really gives me confidence that what we've done is going to stick. People are going to continue to see, and like you.
How active can we be together without being too like, you got to let it be organic, I suppose.
Yeah.
About how do we start that organicness?
But the organic happens, imagine walking into an ecosystem where 3,000 people hadn't just learned all of this new information and all this new process versus one that did. And the guys you run into in the bar and the girls you run into, everyone you run into in the bar, that in that bar is going to be a select pack because there's just more awareness. Everyone now knows the sides in the quote unquote medical versus adult use, which is an unfortunate way to frame it, but that's what ends up happening from a regulatory perspective. Everybody has learned, who Hannah King is representing and what bills that she might endorse or have been a part of writing or might be lobbying for mean. People saw that, they know it now, they can see it and be like, I identify that, and I write an email to somebody about it, and I refer back to it in case anybody wonders there's only one company testifying against this shit. And that was who it is. So you get it, right? And that's like a permanent political fact that you can use 3 years from now, you can use 6 years from now, that can be collectively, exactly.
Boom.
And not even to call out that individual, but more the company she represents. Right? You could see where it was coming from, and you all saw it.
Basically the shit we're seeing on Instagram, Barnett's like, the politicians in Augusta are seeing that in their universe.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's part of why we won.
Right.
Is because
They're
got
also
that
adults.
truth out there.
Right. These representatives are, and like you said about the public.
I mean, they kind of out themselves because they're just such shameless actors
Yeah.
and actresses.
In what ways is it most shameless now? What becomes most
Where to
apparent?
begin?
What do you see, John? Well, let's let
I'll
John
stop
up
talking
first,
for a
so that way
second.
you can gather your thoughts.
I'll stop yelling. Yeah.
Wait, what is most shameful?
What's most shameless to like the type of preservation that the members of like the MCCA are looking for in this united move? I know it's been a breather. It's obviously been a needed breather, but to know like, okay, you just went to war, or you had a battle, however you want to perceive it, and those type of. That was much greater than just the cannabis industry, though, too.
To me, it didn't feel. Yeah, maybe it was a battle. I don't know. I've never been to war, so
for sure.
I wouldn't
It was
know.
a conversation in public, is what
But
it was.
it felt like a sustained push. I remember that I was, trying to, keep on my plate personally, to do some actions through a long period of time to try to get to that point. And what's cool is there were actually like hundreds of people making that same personal effort. And it's in that collective that we achieved the success that we have.
Absolutely.
It was the multitude in the range, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
And also the other groups, the main Growers Alliance, the Cannabis Coalition, MCCM, pretty much anyone who'd ever been engaged in testifying or whatever in any way in Augusta came out during
Even
this.
so, Eddie Duguay,
Eddie.
who personally I met because I met him in Auburn City Hall in Augusta because he was a lobbyist for what was formerly Remedy and eventually Curaleaf. And
Right,
evidently
but he worked for Remedy, to be fair. But
that relationship has been severed at some point
right.
in the past, and now he's he has his own caregiver-based company, and he has joined our cause and was, I think, very helpful out there because a lot of people know him, and he's actually a very, very impressive guy and
former rep, been
wonderful
around.
guy. I always liked him very, very much whenever I met him, and he's so. It's just cool to see that broad coalition of different people all say, you know what? Maine can go a different way. We don't have to follow this cookie cutter model that all the other states have followed that's been complained about in every state because it was so damaging to local economies and local businesses, local patients, and really has
And just so
only
stupid.
benefited like wealthy people, corporations, and investors, blah, 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 all along the way.
We're going to encounter a saturation, though, at some point, so it's not all going
You mean
to
here
be-
in Maine?
Well,
here
what,
in Maine.
what we have now is a very open access system. So that means there will be plenty of supply. It's going to be good for patients,
Oh, sure.
and
But
patients
the
will have
adult-
great choice.
Right. The adult use market, though, it lacks in a lot. There's a perceived idea that for some it's the convenience of, I don't need to get a med card. It's misinformation or not
There's
really
definitely some of
understanding.
that, yeah. But when you say saturation, do you mean kind of all of those markets sort of squished together,
I
working
think
together?
we haven't fully
what that
seen
looks like?
what
No,
the markets
nothing.
are going to be, and we're heading towards.
As a business analyst,
having
I
a
would
better
say.
idea.
No, I'm just kidding, but
Well, what?
I mean, as a business analyst, I would say. But no, I totally agree with you. You don't have to be working.
And I think if I think
know
it
that, I
becomes
think.
fully exposed if we lose certain I guess agreed upon concepts or ideas or protections. The complexities of a medical card or the out of state impact on how much we do get from out of state people who are coming up for retail because it is the best product in the country.
Yeah.
Those who can.
Yeah.
Well, I think we need to defend
We
the
need to
right
defend
of
that. It's
Maine
almost like it
growers and
becomes a little bit
producers to serve those people. I mean, look, you listen to, if you just listen to these patients when they come up here, I mean, they have a difficult situation back where they're from in terms of
very true.
procuring safe, effective medicine at a reasonable price.
Yeah.
They're making a long journey to come here. And they feel like they need to do that. And so we should be defending the right of Maine producers, growers, extractors, processors, all of us, to serve that need, which is very good for Maine's local economy, obviously.
Yeah.
I think what we're doing there is we're allowing a craft ecosystem to exist, which is the only reason anybody in the future is going to drive to Maine or fly to Maine around cannabis or associate good things with Maine about cannabis, because most of the rest of the country doesn't know all that much about us or isn't close to us.
No, not yet. We haven't started advertising, so to speak.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
But give me 4 years, and I don't think we're going to have federal legalization by then. There certainly won't be. There won't be federal.
Ask you. That's on my list of questions.
Yeah, good. Well, we'll get
there.
You know,
later.
we can get there now if you want.
No, we'll get there later. We'll get there later.
But in that world, let's say where barriers all are gone, what is going to differentiate any cannabis versus the Colombian shit that gets grown for absolutely nothing and is just massively, the sun just crushes in greenhouses there, and they're exporting millions and millions of tons. And what the fuck are you going to do as a craft guy? Well, the only thing you're going to do is have a better product, and have a connection to your community and a reason for a person to buy it from you, even though it isn't the Walmart price, right? There's a market for Walmart and a market of necessity too, which is where this gets into like class and about why we shouldn't make it expensive to do this business, because we also need to keep it cheap to compete with Walmart. But I digress. What reason would anybody have to fuel Maine's economy from outside if our product wasn't just way better and different and
right.
actual agriculture and really people powered and like more than marketing? It's so Curaleaf probably has an ad running somewhere talking about we are the community. Well, they're marketing that shit. Nobody believes it. Nobody ever will. But the reason they're marketing it is because it's a powerful idea, and we actually are that here. And we can live that, and that is the real thing here. And so you have to preserve the real thing, because otherwise you got no thing. When all the barriers fall, which they will.
So we can't really allow that or necessarily think that that's going to come from on a state level as marketing ourselves as that. They very well could, and they probably should as time goes on here.
Highly recommend that to anyone listening.
That whole coast, or if you opened it up for that type of hospitality, it'd be amazing.
There's so many
you could
different
do
ways.
Amazing hospitality just because of what it is.
Let's send a barge of medical cannabis to France. I mean, are you kidding? Like, why wouldn't we do that? We send a barge of beer to Iceland.
I know.
Why wouldn't we be doing that?
I think that as long as
besides international waters
as long
and
as
trafficking, but
there's got to be something.
as
a way to
long
do
as
it.
we can keep a regulatory structure going that supports this cottage industry, that lets all of these talented people just kind of get
Give
in
it a
there and
try.
operate. And, and then there's the competitive playing field where that shakes out. But let's not game the rules as they do in other states to make it so that it's a pay-to-play system. Or even worse, just limit the number of licenses.
just pure
you're gonna
thuggery.
get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think ever limiting will be a bad idea?
Yes, always.
Always.
Got-
Limitations always are.
Here
I
in
agree.
Maine, we don't want to do that.
What about
here
the
in Maine?
no cap
we
that was
want to
on
we
Portland
want to.
for a little while? I thought that had limitations.
Things have there were implications in other things that they had tried to do with that ordinance, and the reason that had to happen was because the ordinance was so badly written and so
was
messy
it?
and dysfunctional that the best thing to do was just nuke the thing, kind of.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
That I didn't know. I wasn't
There's
aware.
obviously some issues with that.
Sure.
But look, we don't all have to agree on whether it was the right way to license, but it was better than doing it the way that they were going to end up doing it. Because I'm not going to lie, higher grounds, the way that maybe these things would have gone if it weren't for, kind of blowing the cap off, I'd have been in a runoff with somebody.
Yeah.
Sure. Everybody in that market. There were people who had 4 conflicts. 4 people in a buffer. It was just going to get nasty and horrible and everyone attacking each other. So the best move was to delete all that shit. But anyway, I didn't mean to sidetrack.
Wow.
It's very Game of Thronesy, actually.
It is. And this is like what I
Good thing
personally
we avoided that situation.
Today.
I'm glad
That's
other
today's
people
society.
occasionally can see what my other full-time job is because,
Pro
that
wrestler.
Pro wrestling.
You
I
know
can
that
see
guy who eats nacho chips really loudly on that commercial? No, I'm kidding.
And just for the record,
that was John a while ago.
It was almost me too.
Barnett is sporting a hot pink Higher Grounds
Yeah, baby.
tank top.
Bestseller.
He's looking
Sun's out,
very
guns
good.
out.
The guns are out. He's looking fit.
Unicorn flip. We got it.
He's got his mullet trailing.
I'm glad you mentioned
in the
that.
breeze.
I'm glad you mentioned that because something that is actually really great about Higher Grounds that has nothing to do with me is that we are a queer-owned business and a woman-run business. And I don't market that, but I have like a microphone and people are maybe listening. So I'm like, oh, I really need to say this.
Get the word out, right?
Yeah. You know, I'm a gay man. I'm queer. I'm not, you know, and we are making space in a place where straight white guys who just have a lot of money and that's the only reason they're involved in the conversation kind of run shit.
Yeah.
And you're in there making space and it's hard to do no matter who you are, but we're doing it as queer people, as, you know, like my general manager is a Latina woman who, yeah, her career in service or in anything else would be really weird. You know, Maine is still a tough place to be for a lot of people.
I was going to ask, is there not a lot of gay business owned operations in
I know of a
Portland
couple.
or through the state?
I know of a
Because
couple.
like even up here, there used to be like a couple gay bars. The Sportsman's Club was one of them.
One of the
Another
victims, one of the victims of general acceptance is special places that are sort of reserved for queerness. So, I think Portland only has one real gay bar and another queerish bar, but it's because you can go to any bar. It's just not that big an obstacle in being alive as it used to be.
Right.
Not to diminish the, you know, experiences of any of my like queer or trans, anybody, you know, sort of family who have a different experience of that, because that is still very real. But just, we all know in general, the environment's a little better, and especially in Portland. But you don't, because of that, you don't have those special places. And so, like, you know, you come into my shop, it's not necessarily like a gay bar,
Right.
but I have my Nasty Women flag that I wore on my back. Well, me and shitloads of women and queer people, and yes, straight people, but thanks for coming, allies.
Yep, right.
To support the actual, you know, I have that there. People have walked out of my shop after seeing that. I don't care, you know.
You mean not to return?
Yes,
No
right.
intent.
And you hear them talking like, "Oh my God, what is this?" You know, and look at my hair. I mean, I look ridiculous to a certain kind of person. I've been told by people.
What do they walk out in reaction?
Or my Nasty Women, you know, cape that I have draped over my storage closet.
What does that associate with? I don't
The
know.
Women's March. The Women's March.
That was opposed to President Trump.
Yeah,
Okay.
and of course, you know, he was the catalyst that was more about, wow, women are treated as second class and, you know, abused, and the things that we kind of take for granted are awful. They're so awful and so persistent. I mean, yeah, it was about everything, and it was amazing. So anyway, I want to shout that out because, you know, I think it's really important. Cannabis is a space where a lot of, you know, generally queer people are working and are actually attracted to, because there are different sets of values and it's newer, and I don't know, there's a lot of queer people in the space in general, but not a lot of owners, just like there aren't black owners.
It's a libertarian space.
Is it? Is that how you see it?
Cannabis, you mean?
Yes, I think so.
In Maine, maybe. In Maine. Yeah, everywhere
Well,
else
yeah.
it's arch reptile space. It's not really libertarian. It's monopolist, you know. Anyway, pugilist.
Well, I've always associated cannabis, the culture of cannabis, with, you know, a free-spirited mentality and a
So you mean like libertarian in the
thought.
non-statist way?
Isn't that
Yes, perhaps more philosophically.
Isn't that one of the reasons why you got into cannabis? So you kind of had like this awakening at a different point in your life that kind of opened up this idea. You mentioned something like that.
I've
before,
always liked cannabis.
Right.
I used a fair amount when I was a youngster growing up in
when
Maine.
you were a young lad,
Yeah.
hopping around the neighborhood.
Someone called the Poison Control Center.
Yeah.
This guy might have ingested cannabis 20 years ago. No.
But I didn't use very much in my adulthood, in part because of the places I was living and the things I was doing.
Professions? You think some professions stop it? Like stop the.
I've worked in
prevent the use.
Yes.
Partners.
Yeah, I've worked in
friends.
Yeah, I've worked in professions where it's kind of a no-no. So I think it can be like that, and a lot. It's still a very stigmatized thing in all kinds of little sectors of our society, and so it's getting more accepted here in Maine now. I don't feel stigmatized personally in Maine at this point. Sometimes I do have negative experiences for instance, when I'm smelling like cannabis because of my work or patient use.
Yeah, people look at you a little differently still,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So I still get a little bit of that here and there in Maine, but most people, seem like they accept that this is happening now and have learned things or had personal experiences which have softened whatever prior aversions to or condemnations.
A new segment of the population entrusted this idea of the medical program and the things that you can get from the medical program. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like,
Well, it broke down stigma. The fact that there was that step of being a medical, compassionate care, seeing it work for people, having it change someone's life.
It's definitely hard to be, I think, to continuously to be so ignorant or staunch about the topic, because now everyone,
if you've ever used it,
right, that too, and like there's no way you don't know someone that, like you said, is either affected or someone that's in the industry and it's had a positive impact on their life. So I think it's really starting to break down barriers. Yeah, I think there might be some people here and there, but it's I think sometimes too the looks, even it can be almost a look of like interest, or like I know that, because sometimes I'm like, that guy definitely just came from a grow, so
it seems forbidden, but it isn't like verboten. It's not bad.
Yeah.
But again, everyone in this room, we should look around, and like everyone who's, especially in Maine, but in a lot of these sort of wealthier states and so on, where it is a little bit more like that. Can we all just take a minute to appreciate how unbelievably lucky we are, how unbelievably hooked up, special, quote unquote, privileged, whatever word you want to use.
yeah,
Because that we represent, in terms of lived experience, like 0.001% of how most people are treated when cannabis is involved in this world, right? Not just in America, but think about other. Anyway, but America happens to be one of the worst abusers
all around the world.
But like the Philippines, where you can die for having drugs on you, and
you're getting executed.
Exactly, by the cops, extrajudicial, whatever, but or murdered by the state, like the cops, or here, where you can be murdered by the state and are murdered by the state every single, probably, look, I don't have the fresh numbers in my mind, but probably every week someone in America is killed that really resulted from cannabis being illegal in some way.
Yeah, it was back in March that you, through the MCCA, that you approached or proposed something to the state, was it not, on those grounds?
You're talking about the MDEA agents. So that was actually what was that, a year and a half? God, the pandemic just threw this black hole in the middle of time. But the summer, was it 2019? Yeah, what the? Somebody call Poison Control Center. Yeah.
Is everybody okay?
2019, I think.
No, wasn't that early 2020, right before?
You gotta roll another one.
You
of
might
these?
be right. You might be right.
This is good, by the way.
Thank you.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, Noel, thank Randall. Wonderful.
Okay.
We haven't just been.
Please, Carrie, take
all for me.
Help yourself.
Blue Star Dog's really good.
There you go.
That's a good
one of my
choice.
favorites in the state.
Yes.
I gotta say.
Nice.
Kim and Glue.
Nice.
Who would complain?
Well, so to your question about, the MDEA agents.
Yep.
So, one thing I think that often goes unnoticed are the ways that organizations like ours and the Cannabis Coalition, whatever, are working is in playing defense and in looking for problems, not just necessarily celebrating the industry or trying to, make things better, but also just watching for landmines. And there was quite a landmine from the budget there, where they were trying to hire Maine Drug Enforcement Agency agents to be civilian
To be what?
enforcers of the adult use and medical
Oh, yeah,
program.
right.
And now, again, I would be doing a disservice to.
Yeah, but on the surface, that looks like the right thing to do.
Well, that's what some would say.
That's what I just said.
Yeah.
And you would say.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, letting the DEA or anybody from the
Well, having
criminal
some
anything
representation.
whatsoever background, I think is a huge mistake. If we want to do, you would never think to, okay, this guy's got to go in and look at this guy's cows and make sure that they're healthy and he's not poisoning people with X, Y, and Z because he contaminates the raw milk with a cop, because a cop doesn't know shit. Their job is totally different. And so if they come into your grow, and we've been fighting this from day one,
Yeah, away
John,
from
you
the
and I both,
enforcement aspect of it.
John, you and I both fought this in Auburn when there was an attempt, and again, like you said, it seems like a good idea. Why not? They were going to try to use police officers as inspectors. And we were like, you can't use law enforcement officers as inspectors. You literally can't do that. And there's so many reasons why.
It's very unsettling.
But one of them is just common
Is it
sense.
just that
What the
overbearing
hell does a
feeling that they've
cop
always
know about my cooking setup?
Cooking?
I've got all, or like extraction. You've got this massive lab, let's call it.
Right, that could be boiled down to unreasonable search and seizure too at the base
and
level.
not to
Like,
mention
you
the
know?
unreasonable search and seizure, which we got into, and some people responded to when we were passing LD 1242, because even going in and inspecting video footage of your house or being able to show up at any time at your house, oh, sorry, you're violating the Constitution, like you are in so many other places in this document, and like all cannabis regulation does in so many ways. That's the one thing, on top of the most important move, which is the social justice element of decriminalization, which, why are we even talking about business? Let's just stop killing people and putting them in jail for it. But that second level was also...
Amen, Brother Barnett.
Is that more of, I guess the way I'd look at it, it's still a racial injustice
Absolutely.
more than anything else.
Yeah,
that's why there's still...
It's the white power
that
state.
It's still happening.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. The white power state and the relationships between that and the, sort of business oligarchs who have always been happy to ride whatever pony they got to do to make sure that they can, kind of dominate a certain thing.
As long as they
Well,
maintain power,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah.
The war on drugs was simply, it was
commerce.
it was a war on minorities,
It was economic terrorism and racial terrorism.
Yeah, and
Minorities more?
minorities, I think, and gay people and hippies, and that was one thing you couldn't make that illegal.
right.
But what you could do for the most part is make some of the stuff they enjoyed doing illegal, and
Well,
that's what I think
it's a pretext
was
to go after the people they want to go after.
exactly.
Well, and I think
it's taken so long, and you brought up a good point too. Something that
Selectively.
I think I'm really passionate about is that a lot of the times, I try to imagine being the person. Yeah, you're fine to do whatever. Imagine being the person in jail, a black person in jail for crime. And there is they've gotten their 3-strike law sometime off of a simple marijuana charge. Now they're serving. I think I've referenced Tamika Drummer before, serving like a life sentence because of this stuff. And mother of 2, she's been in prison since like 19 years old. And they had to think now she's sitting there watching, rich white guys talk about, and I don't like to get deep into race, but talk about, their stocks and how much money they're making. It has to be such a fucked up reality to say, wow, damn, I'm here because of an ounce, less than $300, and this does happen to people of every color across the whole spectrum. But I mean, it's really
a disservice
sickening
to
for
not
sure.
actually specifically talk about it in a Black American context because, yes, and like you said, it is actually a class thing in a huge way. And it is, there are all these other pieces, but the most negatively impacted group of people are clearly Black Americans, and it like massively so. And then also non-white non-Americans. What did we do to Central and South America? Holy shit. You know, we're literally starting wars down there in using drug policies. I mean, America multiplied its like police state murderous, you know, sort of drug policy across the world. That's why other world governments have these views on cannabis. Their cultures didn't have those views traditionally about cannabis in most cases. I mean, we
marketed it as really bad. You know,
well, exactly. But we also like made it part of this is how we do this. The drug treaties are like American bullying. Like this is how we organize the system for our pharmaceutical companies, for example. But you can't talk about it in a non-specifically Black American context and say nothing else matters more than that, which is why I think everyone should write their representatives and their senators and tell them not to support the Democratic bill in the Senate, not to support Chuck Schumer's bill, but to instead support Ayanna Pressley's resolution, which basically says we are only decriminalizing it, full stop. We're not negotiating it based on what people want from economics. We're not negotiating it based on what people want from, you know, the sort of drug rehab world, that whole cartel of business. We're not talking about this in any other way except that we are decriminalizing it right now and getting people out of jail right now and doing restorative justice right now.
Aren't they going to want like a trade-off though for that? I
mean, that's her point though, is we cannot go into that trap, and that's what we should push for, because that is what Americans want. I think actually there are, and we saw that in Maine, and I don't want to equate the two parties, national and the state, but we went to people here who are Republicans. Their national party is foul on the issue of drugs, almost any social issue in a lot of ways, not to, you know, but it just, the national party there is a really problematic group. Here in the state, they were like, oh, absolutely. They totally get it. And in fact, that idea that some bully gets to set the rules for how the economy works is something that a lot of people who are Republican voters or more conservative have never really been comfortable with. It's a core concept, I think, in a lot of ways, of people who consider themselves conservative. So you can make that argument to them, you know, yeah, you probably are fully funded by big business, but politically you get it and your voters get that we shouldn't be over-regulating to the purpose of a few monopolies, because isn't that socialism? And they get it, and you can make that argument. And so it's incumbent, I think, upon liberals and people who are, you know, whatever, cool on drugs or progressive or whatever, to recognize that and see that that's the thing that we can do, and that's the only thing that actually matters. They tell you, oh, the banking is the one thing we can do, and that's the one that matters. No, that's number two. Number one is decriminalization, empty the jails, make people's lives right for what you did to them, at least in some way. Stop using this to break apart families and the fabric of culture, etc. So I just think you're absolutely right, and you shouldn't shy away from that. And, you know, lots of people feel like they have to qualify it when we talk about that, but I think you don't have to qualify it that way. You can say that the only thing we should be talking about is the Black American experience of cannabis, and how that should inform our next step.
Like, that's a pretty educational standpoint as far as like the, I would have never realized that the Democratic bill didn't really put forward a whole, you know, people getting out of jail, you know,
but it does have that. But that's like that's the hook for them. And then there's an economic framework built into it when we could just do that. And
it's like the normal political game, like they normally try to wrap everything else.
And they stuff it. There's going to have to be they're going to want something in return for it. That's how it operates, unless we can impact what their ask could be.
Well, then write to Jared Golden if you're here in Lewiston. Write to, you know, any of our state delegation or any of your own state delegation and tell them to just decriminalize it and empty the jails, and don't get it bogged down. I think
easy letter, easy call, something like that.
Look, you know, I mean, there's a million issues, but this one's kind of like sexy right now in some ways, and it's also going to be a high profile failure for, you know, Schumer to try to pass this bill. There's no way that bill's passing. You kidding me?
Well,
Joe Biden's going to look at it and say, first of all, I'm conservative-ish about this issue. I don't think we should just run headlong into selling weed legally because he's from that generation, but he can also be like, and I'm also negotiating with Philip Morris? Maybe not. And Amazon on the other side, that's literally who you're looking across the table at on these bills now. Amazon,
that's who's next.
Philip Morris.
That's who comes into the game are not
they're
matched,
funding the people who are lobbying for these bills. That's who's lobbying for these bills right now. That's why Chuck Schumer is moving this shit. And it's those companies. And Biden knows that.
First time, but the second time it's gonna be a go.
What's that?
Isn't it? It has potential to fail this first time, but I would think that the framework would be set in place for.
Let's not get complacent about the House elections.
Also, too, I feel like if you fail, it's a political embarrassment
it's gonna
to fail
badly.
And then normally most of the time they won't want to go for it again unless they have a really strong push or they're feeling like a real big vendetta because it's such an embarrassment the first time politically to say that your bill fell flat in its face. That
on this issue, there's a huge amount of energy behind the activism element of it, and there's a huge amount of money pushing for the commercial element of it. So it's not going to ever go away, and no one's going to feel bad for trying to hook up billionaires. They get paid to do that shamelessly every fucking day, so they'll do that double dip, do it again another time, baby. I'm still getting, cover me in that shit, right? I digress, but. I do think, and you were talking about getting to the federal conversation. I don't think a Biden administration passes a cannabis bill because I don't think that the centrist Democrats are capable of passing criminal justice reform by itself because they're all so beholden as well to the corporate interests that they'll always make the call, well, this is the time, like you said, to stuff this bill and do it with this. This will get us through there. And that's just not, I don't think,
it's not paired with anything.
It's like the epitome of politics, though. There's never no pure intention. There's always something, where's the snake in the grass in the sense, it's always something
And
else.
you have to accept that sometimes to do the right thing. And that's, I think, what you're referring to is obviously there is going to be some trade-off. But I think it's so nakedly obvious why and who right now that nobody who, really has the best interests of his party's future in mind is going to just be like, you know what? The way that Amazon wants to do this is the way we should enshrine in federal law. Let's do that. We're actually looking at antitrust against those companies right now because we're focused on the long term politically. I think the people who are caretakers of that party, for example. So Joe Biden is, as the president and a guy who's going to die in 10 years, he doesn't need to be famous, super popular. He's going to do the right thing in some cases. And this is one of those where he's just going to be like, I'm not going to support something that's done from that angle.
It doesn't seem like it's something that is really of his interest to go into.
Not a priority.
Not unless there's
Too
some
many
sort
other
of
fights.
redemptiveness for past transgressions, bills that he introduced back in the day.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Well, that's why I think, you really.
I believe it was the mid-90s, right?
The crime. Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of different.
So he has a lot of things to pay for and a lot of ground to make up. And I think that's why
Hopefully,
you can
that's
succeed.
Why he wouldn't vote for it if he wants to.
Well, and that's why I think to any strategist out there who's listening, you can succeed just doing the restorative justice bill. Pull the commercial shit off of it. It is an interstate commerce issue, but states should, that's a state's power, federal, whatever. Don't get into it. Decriminalize. There's one thing that we agree that the federal government has total authority on is as interpreting the Constitution against things that are wrong across the states. So let's make cannabis legal. Let's let everybody out. When a state tries to go, the federal government stops them from fucking with you. We're going to have to train cops not to shoot people over weed. We're going to have to, but we can invest in that, and the benefits to society are obvious to all. So that we can do that. We can just pass that.
Do we, Evan, you brought it up a little while ago about so a lot of medical states that are getting put into positions allowing for people to participate being over the top, just way too much. Creating models like what we have had here and the battles that we're going to start to maybe assume, should we be aligning with other states, those cannabis associations in other states? Would it make sense? The ones who are still to some degree resemble what models we have here, like help them, because in the long run, it's going to be for the better if we have more numbers that, involved.
Yeah.
Rather than just, as beautiful as it would be to have Maine be the only state in America that
What a
has
shame,
this
right?
ability or access to grow good medical and provide,
Yeah.
it just wouldn't work. It just shouldn't work only that way.
I think that's part of my
So we
dream
need
for that
allies.
next step for the Craft Cannabis Association is to work with a national organization, both through speaking a lot, and all of us here in Maine speaking to our own delegation. But yeah, as you said, liaising and partnering and making these larger groups that maybe do send somebody to Washington during certain periods of time and that do have that meta level organization, because Alaska, God, it's such a short list. It's so depressing. But
Wait,
Alaska,
what'd you say, Alaska?
Oklahoma, Oregon, kind of.
What's the R&D in making a room in Alaska?
and,
huh?
we all
Nothing
know
on the outside walls, right? Nothing on the outside
we
walls.
all know patients from other states in the Northeast
Yeah.
Right.
that really wish that there were a medical program in their home states like
yeah.
there is
Oh,
here.
for sure.
Like a real
Without
one,
a doubt.
right?
And we should
Yeah, really.
support their,
Yeah.
their desire and crusade to have that. So,
Well,
that's great if we could do something to help them.
Yeah, and we've had,
Not just those, but the future medical markets
Yeah.
that are only starting to on paper
Right.
making sense, and so
Right.
those are the ones that
New
almost
programs.
protect. Are normal programs within a lot of those states? That
Normal?
It's just normal.
yeah, they have a good presence, I think, to some extent, as much as anyone does,
Yeah.
but not a real.
Is it an educational or laying the groundwork on a legislative level? For
I
the
think it
cannabis?
varies.
It
You know,
varies?
they'll submit testimony on things, and if you go to their website, they have some like white paper type policy positions and stuff. But I think what people need to recognize about Normal is that they've been in the game so long that they very much play within its rules. So they wouldn't support necessarily what we did up here.
Gotcha.
Even though Representative Lynn Williams from Bar Harbor, who, we worked directly with her to craft that bill. And she was the lead sponsor of that bill, and she battled for it, and she was amazing, and everyone look her up. She's wonderful. She also directs films, awesome, Maine, great. But she was on the legal board and, has been a part of Normal for a long time. But she's kind of an extreme radical almost in some ways, because Normal is almost sort of like they talk about mandatory tracking as if it's some answer. They're that kind of bought in some ways.
Really?
Because they're willing to make that surface level seeming argument sacrifice in order to get things be legal.
I thought we were going to have to give that up, to be honest with you.
We all did, didn't we? And
yeah.
then we just deleted it.
Yeah, you know it.
But no, I mean, what I mean
I
is
thought that was good.
Normal has never been like powerful. No cannabis organization or advocacy groups have ever been powerful.
It's not
so they've
really
always had to-
influence.
It was
Not so
it
much.
was a bold philosophical choice
Yeah.
to
attack
go
that.
to just put a fucking torpedo right in that.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we had a great argument, which was true, which is operationally at the scale of caregiver businesses, this is actually a major cost
Yeah.
that a lot of small businesses would not be able to comply with easily. Caregivers are already working long hours doing all kinds of tasks.
Yeah.
Because these are pretty complex little businesses.
Especially for one or two
How many-
people, which is
how
so many.
entities,
With a lot-
How many entities are comprise the MCCA?
Right now there
Yeah,
are
right now.
13.
How many?
13.
13.
Yep.
And
we
various
have a-
sizes, but
And we have
nothing
a nurse practitioner as well who's
Oh,
on
you
the
do?
board. She's not obviously profiting from cannabis in the same way that the rest of us are, so it's a very different voice.
Yep.
But I would say we range from the absolute micro, one person, another group's two, another group's three. Some folks are starting to get into a place where they employ 5 people. We have a couple people who don't even meet the definition of small business anymore. Maybe they employ more than 20 people,
Right.
which is like a legal thing that we were
legal
prepared to
term,
fight
yeah.
about in this last session. But so it's quite a range. There's processors, there's cultivators, there's retailers and policy people and healthcare and patients. We're all patients. I think everyone in the group is patients. And that's also, a really important thing that we don't really highlight that in political testimony, but to some extent, you got to use this shit to have any ability to talk about the positive element of it, in a lot of ways. Or the practical implementations of certain things, because it's like, oh, does this person want like a 10 milligram bottle that has to have 3 different plastic moving parts just to have 10 milligrams? Like, no one will ever make the choice to have that packaging if they've ever used cannabis. But to these policy wonks who live in stupid corporate, regulation world, like, what makes it more regulated?
And it's the allowance. I love the idea of an identity for main brands too. I like that. I wouldn't want to see that removed anytime soon. In fact, I'd rather see it embraced. And so,
oh yeah, yeah.
The more that people can push what they are and who they are, it allows for that's that place out in Auburn or wherever you might be located.
Right.
But
I went to
if
school
they
with
can
him.
have that
They're
kind
cool.
of recognition
Right.
and relationship with you.
Yeah.
That's great long term. Or down in the Portland area. Yep.
Do we think having such a diversified standpoint as far as like from advocacy groups could have been more of a hindrance than
That's a
the
good
benefit?
question.
Like, I mean, obviously
Yeah.
there's freedom of expression in that sense of having an opinion. I think it's crucial and important. But there's moments where I said, wow, if
tactically,
everyone was on the same page on this and everyone pushed one thing, there might have been more of a, there was always a general consensus of, fuck these people, or we're cool with these people.
Fuck you, guy.
That's
Yeah.
kind of how you viewed things. Is like you're like, oh, all right, well, this is who we hate now collectively in the main cannabis community. I guess this week.
But I know what you mean.
Yeah, but that's always one thing I wondered if it would have been more tactical to approach everything as one.
Well, I think, there's 2 things going on there. One is, the conceptual, which is in theory not. Yeah, I think in general, a lot of times it makes it simpler for politicians and easier for them to kind of know that there's one industry voice and one kind of unified voice, which I would say we all kind of came together and put together this informal, like cannabis council of the different groups. And we met with representatives from each of our groups for months together, actually. And so we did do the actual on the ground work of collaboration. But at the same time, Maine has had the journey that it's had, and certain people know certain people that they know and are viewed one way by one group and another way completely by another group. So it actually does matter to that very specific level. Well, okay, so let's take a random, unnamed senator, and they're sitting on this committee. What do they think of X person who's going to be associated with this? And in that sense, the actual operational tactics that we used over the past 8 months, it was much more effective to have slightly different perspectives and slightly different watersheds, so that you couldn't look at us and say, well, the big guys have obviously come to dominate, and we're not the big guys, I don't mean that, but you couldn't look at like one mass group where you would assume that the biggest players kind of run the show, and so those smaller players don't get as much of a voice. Well, when somebody represents a group that is mostly clearly a very different business model,
categorically speaking,
and one group represents people who deal with children who need cannabis.
Needs are so different.
Their needs are so different. And a group who's all about craft and that kind of more philosophical big picture policy element, which is what we focus on. And you see them all saying the same thing. And it's not that so if there were only one cannabis thing in Maine, and the nurse from the cannabis thing said this, and the business owner from the cannabis thing said this, and the cultivator from cannabis thing said this, they're still the cannabis thing.
It's pretty unified.
But when we are actually different people who had a different path and who self-organized organically to say these things to them publicly and to interact with them, and we all say the same shit, we all came from very different places, that was the home run.
Yes.
That's what delivered only 2 votes against in the Senate. That's what delivered that. So if we had been unanimous,
to be able to come together like that, do you think that's part of it too?
Yeah, right. Where there isn't $12 million
Acceptance of
lobbying
allies.
on this element and 12 million over here and 3 million here and it's so small potatoes to some extent that the stakes are low enough for us to be able to break bread and come together.
It was like you guys were able to, like seagulls, individually pick off, individual senators because you all had your own different approach and whatnot, or lawmakers, and that's what really allowed you to, kind of the David and Goliath scenario.
And I spoke with so many.
It was fun to be a part of.
Yeah, it was incredibly fun.
I remember
actually.
that I sent emails to all of the senators and representatives in the Lewiston, Auburn area because my business is in Auburn and I live in Lewiston. In the final days before the vote. And I got a response, a thoughtful response back from a representative from Auburn that I'd never had prior communication with. That actually my business is not located in the district that individual represents. And it was like they just heard me, they just like read it and heard it philosophically, and I think that's pretty cool.
Spoke to them enough to want to respond to you.
Yeah.
Because they didn't need to. That's not their
So-
Not just with a registered that one voter who would vote against me if I didn't do this.
Was it
Who
curiosity
actually
too?
dug into it.
The small business thing is key here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean strategically, that's a big takeaway.
Because
For the
it's
medical,
pretty
for the
cool.
crafts to exist.
Well, the biggest thing, I think the biggest ally for a citizen right now, it can also be the biggest hindrance for a business, is social media. And that's what I think keeps a lot of politicians and business owners on their toes nowadays. You can't really slip up because everyone's got a camera, everyone's got a phone, and you're like one video away
a
from
loud and
becoming
angry
viral.
spot, yeah.
So I think that's the one thing where people remain guarded and try to actually listen to people because they never know. You don't respond to an email, and who knows if John has enough followers on Instagram to really get some traction to say, hey, this guy from so-and-so district just decided to completely ignore me, and that gains some traction to get this guy or whoever not
To our
elected next time.
benefit to Think United.
Well, it's a
Larger-
compliment.
larger
It's a compliment too to that whole packing the halls thing, which in normal sessions the medical program definitely still would do. There'd be a room full of people staring at you as you're trying to become comfortable with the ideas put in front of you by the Acreage Holdings, and everybody in the room is like, "Are you fucking serious?" It's like anger in my eyes, and you can see it. And that was very powerful, still is powerful, but we had to rely more on that vast blast out on social media because we couldn't pack a room and with our pheromones communicate to the representatives and senators what they needed to do right now, or they were going to get torn apart.
Yeah.
And like that was missing. So that element of having, it was so hugely important, especially this time around.
It was. Mark and John, thanks for coming.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, it
a
was
blast.
super fun to just get a little lit and hang out in the space.
Dude,
Terps and
anytime
Lewiston,
you want.
this is
Actually,
great.
I'm down with it. This
Yeah.
could turn into a Tuesday night thing for me, for sure.
Okay, yeah. No,
Thanks
I
as
live right
always,
across
guys.
the river,
Yeah.
so thank you for having us. This was really
Thanks a
cool.
lot.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Cheers.